In the world of grading trading cards, things have gotten absolutely ridiculous. Everything's a mess. Everyone is messing up. And we're going to talk about all of the issues with grading right now and my ultimate conclusion as to what we should do. So let's get into the details. So Beckett grading. You know, the infamous black label, pristine Beckett slabs, the wonderful gold labels that they have on their 10s. Now, Beckett is known for being more expensive, especially if you happen to have a black label version of any card. But here are some of the issues that I have with Beckett. So Beckett has actually been going down in popularity, not only in the public eye or the public zeitgeist, we're talking about in the total amount of cards that they are grading yearly. Now, I think the main reason this is people are starting to understand how rigged the game is when it comes to Beckett. So people were getting cards sent to Beckett that were obviously not of absolute perfect pristine quality and coming back with black labels. Now, this in a vacuum is not something to be worried about. However, when you're dealing with this happening over and over, repeatedly and repeatedly, people are having cards that are not of the best quality and they are getting the best grade that you can get on a card, and that can be a cause for concern. Now, this isn't something that you should definitely, be like, oh, that's it, it's rigged. But let me point out some other things that might cause this statement to be more true than we possibly had believed before. So, like I said, their overall popularity was going down due to this inkling of this may not be a legitimate place to go ahead and send my cards because the game seems rigged. Well, oddly enough, the owner of Beckett, insurance mogul Greg Lindberg, actually was arrested last December. So December of last year, December of 2024. Now, the reason he was arrested is very, very telling as to what kind of situation we're dealing with. Now, being that they are the owner of Beckett, it really is telling towards their business practices. So they actually were arrested for $2 billion in insurance fraud. And Lindberg pled guilty. So we're dealing with some mogul that actually admits to being fraudulent. So if he has an entire business called Beckett, they're probably engaging in fraudulent activity as well. It's not far-fetched to believe that that is the case. And I firmly do believe that that may have been what's going on. And it's very obvious that things aren't exactly what they seem. When you see testament after testament of these cards that got black labels that have obvious dings, really bad centering, and then cards that look amazing and pristine are not getting them. And it seems to be more of a battle of who you know versus what you own. And it's very frustrating for a person like me who wants to put things in slabs because it looks nice. Goldfish brain, shiny, looks cool. I'm a very big fan of the entire franchise that is Pokemon particularly. I'm going to be looking at other TCGs, but that's a different point. Getting things and putting them in slabs is a wonderful part of collecting trading cards that, in this specific instance, seem to be rigged. It appears that Beckett was being dishonest, and this is very discouraging as someone who likes to just collect and put things in shiny pieces of plastic so that I can look at them in times of, admiration, if you will. So this is the issues that I have with Beckett. Not only is it very hard to get a black label because of their seemingly shady business practices that make it seem like you have to know who is on the other side, or the grader specifically, or even work at Beckett yourself and then get yourself your own black labels. I mean, it doesn't seem like an acceptable place, in my opinion, to be sending your cards to in order to get them graded. On to the next company, CGC. Now, CGC has never been the most popular. They're more of the redheaded stepchild of the big three when it comes to grading cards. There's PSA, CGC, and Beckett. Now, CGC has very recently came under controversy by making a very, very bad mistake. So CGC actually graded these things called playtest cards. These playtest cards, there was a series of them that were actually made. They were printed with a Xerox machine way back in the day in the 90s. And then more came up around, I think it was maybe October of last year, somewhere around that time, but I could be wrong. Those No other grading company wanted to grade them. PSA, Beckett, no one wanted to touch them because they weren't very sure of their legitimacy. CGC went ahead and started grading them, giving them honest grades, and actually these cards were selling for tons and tons of money. A lot of money. Thousands of dollars, thousands of transactions. All of these playtest cards were getting put into the pool and actually graded, and CGC made an oopsie daisy because someone cracked one of these slabs. And if you don't know this, Xerox actually puts a small imprinting into what they are printing that tells you the date that it was actually printed. So someone went by and actually scanned the items and found out that they were scanned in 2024. That's correct. These were made in 2024. These were printed in 2024. So they made a serious oopsie daisy. A very, very bad oopsie daisy. They actually were grading these cards, claiming they were legitimate, and people were buying them. And so people were buying essentially worthless pieces of crap that some Joe Schmo actually printed up. And what do you know? CGC refuses to refund anybody for any purchases or damages along that. Any seller that sold these items is also not trying to reimburse or refund or compensate anybody that was hurt in spending money on these items that are absolutely worthless. Hey, this is Post Recording Me. So I actually did a little bit more research, and it turns out that CGC did actually send out a recall for all of those playtest cards, and you could send anyone that you possibly believe is fake back to CGC and they will make things right. So good on them. And that's exactly what we want to see from very big companies in this space. Accountability is very huge, and CGC has gained a lot of respect from me whenever they decided to go ahead and do this. So CGC, in the eyes of not only me, but in the public, has definitely lost its luster and its shine even more than it did before, where the only thing that was worth it was the gold pristine labels that CGC could offer. I'm seeing no one ever putting up a CGC slab in these recent times. So I don't believe CGC is going to be successful in the long term unless they can go ahead and prove that this was a one-off and that this is something that will not happen again. Next, we have PSA, the absolute veteran of the space. PSA is notorious for being the most consistent and high-dollar grading service that is available. Now, we are dealing with something very strange in the Pokemon market. The volume of people that are sending cards in to get graded has exponentially risen to the point where a lot of places are having issues fulfilling demand. PSA, as grand and magnanimous as they are one of the companies that's struggling very hard in fulfilling everyone's needs to get their cards graded. So what was once a 45-day turnaround is now turning out to be almost 300 days. So we're looking at 10 months. So you send your card in to get graded, and 10 months later seems to be when you're getting your card. And right now, we're not even talking about them losing your card, which seems to be more of a common occurrence now that they're dealing with a volume so high as it is now. So PSA is definitely having its issues and its struggles, even though it's more consistent than the others. They are scaled correctly to handle a very large volume, but now the volume has exceeded their expectations by a huge margin. This is a very substantial issue because if you're going to be the big dog on the block, you're going to be the top head honcho. It's very unfortunate that people are sending in their cards, and not only are they coming back way longer and way later than they had initially anticipated, there's also an issue where it might get lost in the sauce when it comes to shipping or in their warehouse or storage facilities. So this is a very big concern. And on top of that, there are counterfeit PSA slabs all over the place, everywhere. I saw a video about 2 days ago about a counterfeit Poncho Pikachu. It was a 10, and boom, it was super fake. Absolutely bonkers. Fake, 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 fake. We're talking about, a $6,000 to $10,000 card, depending on which Poncho it is. That's a very expensive card, and to spend that money and it be absolutely illegitimate is very, very discouraging. It is very easy to break PSA slabs, and all you need is the sticker from the inside of the slab. You can, mold your own slab and put in a different card that is not legitimate or not a 10, and then you can go ahead and actually resubmit your original 10. Very, very unfortunate happenstance. I think that there's very little way to mitigate this other than finding a way to etch a code or an imprint onto each card that gives it a unique fingerprint. And that way, if it gets resubmitted, it's the same card that it was before. There's also something else that recently happened. So PSA, originally, their price per card was $16.99. And because of the increased influx of people sending cards in, they changed their price to now $18.99. So what this does is if you're going to have a card that, say it's a $30 card, and if it gets a 10, it's a $100 card. Now your price for grading it and shipping and all the other nuances that go with sending a card in, you know, your card sleeves, your semi-rigids, all of that stuff. Now, if you send it in and it doesn't get a 10, you're now losing more money than you had initially been able to have a margin to lose. So before, when it was about $15 or $16, you were able to have a little bit of margin of error. Some of the time, whenever you got a PSA 9 back, it was able to cover some of the costs that were attributed to grading. And now that it's almost $20 a card, or after taxes, it's definitely $20, you're going to be looking at a very, very large issue to where if a card is not in any way going to get a 10, you probably shouldn't send it in unless you just want it in a slab. But we all know that people are sending cards in to get graded for the monetary value, especially at this point in time. The other thing that PSA did was actually change their measurements. And what I mean by that is their certified standards in order to say that a card gets a 10. It originally was a 60-40 split on the centering for the left and right and the top and bottom. However, now it is a 45-55, so it's a 5% margin differential. That being said, now it's become even harder to get a PSA 10. That is very, very significant in the grand scope of things. Now, a lot of these recent implementations by them are probably to put a stranglehold on the influx of cards being sent to them. But as a normal, ordinary consumer like myself, it's very unfortunate that if I want to send a card to PSA, I might not get it for a very long time. I'll most likely not get the grade that I want. And it can also just be lost. There are tons and tons of stories on Reddit about the delays when it comes to grading, and it being, instead of 45 days, it's 180 days. That's 6 months. That's way, way, way too long. I want my card back. You know, I know someone's only going to look at it for a small period of time. Why is it taking so long? Not only that, bunch of stories of people having their card completely lost and gone. That's very saddening and very frustrating and scary. I'm mailing off this piece of cardboard that means a lot to me or is worth a lot to me. And in that sense, in that same vein, it could just be gone. It's a higher risk to send to PSA of all people. That's very unfortunate and very scary and daunting as far as sending cards to get graded. PSA has a lot of issues that they need to work out. Whether it's figuring out a way to process cards a lot faster, or implement a system that makes it a lot easier for people to send their cards in, and it be safer on its journey there and its journey back. And lastly, since PSA is having issues dealing with volume, and Beckett's dealing with its controversy, and CGC is dealing with its controversy, this is a perfect opportunity for another grading company to rise from the ashes or the rubble of the scenery we see before us. So, given that that is the case, we have all been exposed to Tag. Now, Tag, I was a big believer, but there's some things that have happened recently that make me question whether or not this company is going to be built to last. So I'm going to start talking about Tag and be completely honest with all of my assumptions, research, and evidence that I have compiled to really paint a picture of who Tag is and whether or not it's something you should be interested in. So Tag grading is very, very interesting in the fact that they aren't using human eyes in order to grade the card. Awesome. However, they claim it is AI grading, and that seems to be a little bit of a farce. And the only reason I say this is they take a computer scan of the card, and then a human reads what that scan is, and the human administers the grade. So it is a combination of a computer scan along with a human intelligence. So it's not AI grading. It's just a machine telling you the scores that the card gets, and based on their charts, that score will give you a specific grade. So, in my opinion, saying that it's this revolutionary AI grading program or platform seems to be misleading and overall disingenuous. That being said, we all know that visually their slabs look amazing. However, there has been something very interesting that happened last month. About this time last month, about the middle of the month. I think it was a little bit closer to the first week, but I'll make a video on exactly what happened, but here's a little bit of tidbits of what happened. So there was a user named Ramsey Rips Packs on YouTube and other platforms, but we're going to be talking about his YouTube video. He actually did a tag submission and got them back, and he gets his slabs and he is ecstatic. Absolutely loving it. He's comparing the plastic that's on the tag slabs to a PSA and a CGC, and he's like, look at how amazing this is. These slabs are great. For 9 full minutes, he glazes tag. And then, as he gets his thumb, he puts it on the edge here. He puts it on the edge of the card and does this with all 3 slabs. He does it with the PSA slab, the CGC slab, and when he does it to the tag slab cracks. And he is in disbelief and shock, and he actually continues to fiddle with it, and the entire case shatters. That is very concerning. Now, when you're putting something inside of a slab, the slab, is just another layer of protection. It's not meant to be the only layer of protection for the card. However, just applying the pressure in the correct area shouldn't cause the slab to shatter. Really, it seems like they're not durable in the worst way. I don't know if you've seen videos or attempted to, but if you try to crack a CGC or a PSA slab, you have to cut a corner, you have to use a flathead screwdriver and pry them apart. It's a little bit of a difficult ordeal, especially when trying to maintain the integrity of the card. If you go back and watch Ramsey Rips Pack's video, he can just peel apart the sides of the slab, and it was very, very concerning to see. And then Tag retaliated by putting a bunch of threatening posts implying litigation, and Tag actually came out and said that this was an intended feature. And they said that they were meant to break like that on purpose, and that you should get slab guards if you want your slabs to be protected. Now, like I said, slabs aren't meant to be the end-all be-all when it comes to concussive force and protecting your slabs. However, if it seems like the pressure of a child's strength could break the slab, I believe there's a significant issue that needs to be addressed here. But instead, Tag doubles down, says that this is an intended feature, and that you guys need to spend more money to protect your slabs after already spending money on the slab itself. Now, after Ramsey Rips Packs decided to address what they said, they came out with another statement. And they said, okay, we now have gone back to our facility, and I personally broke 200 slabs and realized that this is a significant issue. So at first, they were claiming that it was an intended feature, and then they backpedaled, and boom, they're saying that, oopsie daisy, it is an actual problem. So they fully made a fool of themselves in the worst way. Not only did they bully this small creator and threaten him, well, didn't directly threaten him, but they implied litigation, giving him a deadline to respond to a comment on a YouTube video like their own owed anything. And here's another thing to keep in mind. So let's say Tag is the future. They're not the future yet. And so say you're spending money to get a Tag 10 because Tag 10s are currently more valuable than a PSA 10. The issue is, what if Tag crumbles and falls? Then you now have a worthless piece of junk that you paid more than a PSA 10 for. That is very significant when it comes to something like collecting cards, because you collect them to hold on to them for a significant amount of time. That's a really rough thing. Now, Tag's initial draw Their initial reason that people wanted to use them was they were cheaper than everyone else, their turnaround time was a lot shorter than everyone else, and the slabs were super, super clean. They did immense marketing. They pushed it on all social media platforms. Every single place that you could see trading cards, Tag was being pushed. But they didn't realize what marketing really does, and it brings more people. And now, the influx of people that have sent their cards to Tag has caused a significant issue in production for them as well. Not only PSA is dealing with this issue, Tag started to deal with the exact same issue. Because they are smaller in scale, it didn't truly comprehend the vast amount of people that were going to send their cards to them. So they, in turn, started having real issues. The same ones that PSA is dealing with. Cards being lost. And the volume of them causing the turnaround time to be increased. One of the main draws of Tag, their turnaround time, is now closer to that of a standard PSA submission. Well, PSA has proven over the decades that it is a very reliable staple in the TCG community, no matter if it's baseball, basketball, hockey, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, PSA is top dog. So they also increased their prices. Tag did. And now their prices are pretty much the same as PSA. And we're dealing with, okay, do I spend the money on this risky company that has proven that their slabs are fragile because they're too hard? Or do I get the tried and true PSA slab that I know will stand the test of time, not only in value, but in condition? I think the Tag has a lot of room for improvement, and I don't necessarily say that they are going to fail in any regard. However, when we're dealing with several companies and comparing what their actual value to the community is, I think every single company is a mess right now. The one that's the least mess is PSA. I just don't want to send my cards in and them come back 6 to 8 months later. That's way too long. So that brings to my final conclusion. I'm not going to be sending in any cards for a long time. You can send them through GameStop, and it seems to be a little bit more secure as far as turnaround times, but there is the absolute threat of possibly an employee taking your card and just saying it got lost. And there are other ways that this can be a very risky situation in general. So I always encourage you to do what you want. If you want to send to any of these grading companies, by all means, send them. I'm just letting you know all of the risks entailed when doing business with these companies. They all are not in good standing when it comes to their publicity, specifically how that publicity gives them reputation in the eye of everyone who sees them. CGC with their immense scam and not wanting to reimburse anybody. Beckett with the insurance fraud and the very obvious leniency towards certain card submissions over others. And then PSA with the insane turnaround times, the counterfeit slabs, the other issues that are going on with it, including their price, which is very, very high. And then also Tag, which is very notorious for being really awesome as far as innovation, but inconsistent in their ability to output real results. If the slabs break insanely fast, that's an issue. I have to repay for the submission just to get a new slab on it. And on top of that, the slab submission is the same price as PSA. And I know the PSA slab won't break unless I deliberately try and crack the slab. I'd rather just pay once to get the grading. And then Tag has its other things like its business practices and its actual handling of situations and being very, very much an internet bully when it comes to small creators. I think that there's a lot of work there as well. So I'm not going to be sending in any cards, not till everyone just gets their shit together. And you guys can let me know down in the comments below, if you had to choose one of these four, who would you go with? I would honestly go with PSA. I just don't want to wait that long. So I'm going to wait so that I don't have to wait a long time. It sounds weird to wait to not wait, but I believe it's in my best interest. If I want a card to come back to me in good condition, I'm going to send it to them, and hopefully it won't be 180 days before I get it back. Well, I'll see you guys next time. Grading is an absolute mess right now.